Welcome to my audio commentary for Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain, released in 2006. And we'll do a brief countdown here. You want to press play to start the movie in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. I'm seeing the 20th Century Fox logo. I never had the chance to see this film in the theaters. I never, unfortunately, saw it advertised and never heard about it until after it was out of the theaters. And so I've only seen it on DVD and Blu-ray. It's a hope of mine that someday I'll be able to see it in real theater and get the true experience of what was intended. So some quick notes here before the start of The Fountain. Lots of shots of going through tunnels, going through doorways, pushing into doorways. We begin here with the Genesis quote, which is going to come into play several times throughout the film, both in the past, present, and future. And we open on the giant sun disk slash cross from about the 1500s. Hugh Jackman was cast in this role, 3 different roles. Quite a great challenge for an actor. And we already start to sense Matthew Libatic's cinematography, different colors. You saw some beautiful golden brown in the firelight. Here we are with a flash forward or backward into old Spain in the castle where it was broad daylight. Now we're back here in a tent in the jungles of South America. And what's about to happen here with the, I don't know if you'd want to call it attack or siege or whatever. It's beautifully done here by Aronofsky. We have the title, The Fountain. But this approach, we start with a still shot of the men standing there with all these skeletons on posts. The beautiful thing about this is we feel an impending sense of doom, no doubt because the cinematography is extremely dark and we have the music pulsing more and more rapidly and building tension. They're going through this canal, and this is a set in Montreal. But it works fantastically because we can't really see as much as we would like to, which is exactly what the characters are experiencing in the film. It is intended to be very dark and hard to see, hard to perceive what is going on. And here we have the first shot, which is slowly dollying down a tunnel, moving down a tunnel towards a gateway, a passageway, a stairway, some sort of way. This also relates to, if you want to get into symbolism and metaphor, birth canal, and this type of stuff. This Mayan temple was actually really built during the first run around when they were going to make this film with Brad Pitt and Kate Blanchett for about 2.5 times the budget. Beautiful push in there on Hugh Jackman as the conquistador soldier. We can already tell and sense that he's brave, bold, courageous. Perhaps a little crazy, but also it shows you that those who run are killed immediately. Just by him standing there and not running, he has already past the first step in a sense. And this also equates to non-linear thinking, outside-the-box thinking, which this Tommy character is going to have throughout the film in the 3 different stages. And so here we have, again, outside-the-box thinking. Now, some people would say this is crazy. No, take on the full of them charging. That's 1 on 50, 500, the way he's doing. What other option do you have? You can see where you want to get to. Almost like a football handoff to a running back. Fantastic overhead shot, pulling back on the crowd carrying Jackman. But this is fantastic. Exactly what he wanted is happening. He got through this giant crowd, in a sense defeating them, and they took him to the very end, and now are sending him up to the last. Obviously, they know, or at least think he's going to be some sort of sacrifice or sacrificial victim or whatnot. But for him, it's already a small victory. Beautiful shot of the Orion constellation, Tommy coming up, the camera pulling back, and this beautiful push in on a Mayan temple. This is obviously a matte painting. But we look down this tunnel and we're hearing this impending doom type music. Beautiful flame photography here again by Libatique. Not very much fill or overhead light. It's pretty much all lit by the fires. You get a sense of antiquity. But this is also so very strange. We've never seen a Mayan priest warrior with a fire sword quoting religious scripture. And also it's ironic that this conquistador gets all the way to this temple coming from old Spain, and what is he left to fight the biggest challenge with but a tiny little dagger? And ooh, he fails. And this is a fascinating way to open a film. You have the hero on this bizarre little episode quest, like Indiana Jones type thing, and he loses, he's defeated. And boom, we cut to Tommy in supposedly about the year 2500 in his spacecraft in outer space. This is very important for the film. This is beautifully done by the director because you have this initial scene that completely draws you in because it's a antiquity to action scene. It's dark, it's mysterious, it's exciting. But then to have to cut to this scene right away, it very much asks the viewer immediately to decide, are you going to go with this or not? Are you going to go along? Can you believe in this reality in this film? We have someone doing yoga, flying through the air, and they're in a spaceship. We've never seen this type of spaceship, which is a clear bulbous sphere with a giant tree growing inside of it. We notice he doesn't have hair. This film, perhaps more than the crossing of 3 different time periods or episodes, is more like a piece of music where you have refrains, you have melody, or verse, chorus. These things sort of intertwine and intermarry. Now we have our first shot here of the recurring sort of nightmare dreams that this Tommy in the future has of seeing his wife from the year 2000 who has died, and he's still having visions of her, replays, memories that are still, and obviously this relates to she keeps telling him to finish it and he won't, and we will come to that later. All the special effects, there was no CGI, there was a strong intent to do either old-fashioned or brand new special effects techniques that would be extremely cheaper than CGI and perhaps be more effective and therefore longer lasting. This is a set on a soundstage in Montreal. I highly recommend two behind-the-scenes documentaries on the making of the fountain by Nico Tavernisi. They're available on Vimeo.com. One is called The Fountain, Death and Rebirth, and the other is called Access to Excess. And again, another jarring scene, because we're supposedly now in the present time, where Tommy has the shaved head, but it's in the year 2000, and then a quick cut to back again on the spaceship in the year 2500. This has echoes of the film Solaris in terms of memory and where someone is in time versus how they're seeing the memory from perspective. And a beautiful example here of the gorgeous special effects shots that were done by a father-son in France, I believe. And I suppose this is the ultimate fantasy for a practitioner of yoga, being able to do yoga at night in pitch black with a star field behind you. But this also indicates that this character is very strongly committed spiritually to yoga. Yoga is a very disciplined practice, somewhat akin to meditation, but about invigorating the chakras and muting the ego to some extent. We have a very unique concept here of someone who's going to tattoo themselves, and I love how it's filmed, very much like a commercial. Lots of extreme close-ups, inserts. There's a montage feel to it, sort of like the artist in preparation or the athlete in preparation. In this case, some sort of futuristic scientist, obviously. At first, when I saw this film, I didn't make a connection right away between the rings he was drawing in tattoo on his arm to, the rings of a tree, but we'll come to that much later. To me, I'm a complete lover of this film. I'm not apologetic for it, but I do love it and think it's fantastic, so I won't have very much critical to say about it. It's important to remember that as a director, you want to make these scenes as believable as possible, and yet they are futuristic. And the implementation of characters who are out of time, who are in costume or from a different time and place, who are inserted here, it has a surreal feel. But it lends credibility to how real the dream or the dreamlikeness of these visions feels to the character in the scene. We notice that it has a ring mark where someone would be wearing a wedding ring. I've never been a huge Hugh Jackman fan, but I felt he was fantastic in this film, and probably the greatest performance of his career, in my opinion. I think the same for Rachel Weisz. We will see this scene repeated several times. Tommy in his small office at the hospital, talking to Izzy about the first snowfall. It'll be repeated a few different times, all with the same shots and angles, just perhaps Tommy has hair or doesn't have hair, is clean-shaven, isn't clean-shaven. There's another push-in on doors closing, forming a cross with the light. And now we have a dolly back through a tunnel as the characters are moving forward through doors. Low-key, soft, beautiful, golden yellow cinematography here by Lubatique. Lots of practical lights. And it's interesting how the director chose to take something as simple as putting the wedding ring on the tray there, and the fact that it's going to be lost and what it's all going to mean, and yet doesn't make a huge deal of it with 5 or 6 shots, just one quick shot of it being put on the grating in the hand washer. Now this was also brilliant, hiding the fact that the subject that they're testing or experimenting on was a monkey. Unless, in my opinion, you're really good at guessing or following some interesting details in the plot or perhaps in the set dressing, I don't see how anyone could tell it would be a monkey that they're experimenting on. So it was a complete shock to me, but super well filmed because it's another reveal that you can save, and it's another visual treat for the audience because there's going to be a beautiful gliding Steadicam shot to a slow reveal of the monkey. Here we have something that's beautifully filmed, in my opinion, by Aronofsky. It's a man who is scrambling, thinking creatively, voraciously, trying to find the answer, and in a flash is going to think outside the box and think in terms of a fractal logic or pattern logic. And he is going to take a chance because this reminds him of some serum that they got from South America in this time. But it shows brilliantly in a matter of 30 seconds those moments of genius that we experience where it's a number of sort of visual flashes and very effectively filmed here. I found it interesting to see Ethan Suplee playing one of the orderlies or assistants. Of course, I always remember him from American History X. What's important for Hugh Jackman as an actor to portray in this sense is he is not only cerebral, but extremely courageous and a fighter. He has that conquistador quality in this present sense where he is a scientist. And in that sense, that is where the equivalency comes from in terms of a conquistador in 1500 to a scientist in 2000. They're both searching and exploring what is considered at that point the last frontier, quote unquote. And in this case, obviously, Tommy is some sort of research scientist who is trying to study whether it's cancer or some sort of cure for aging or whatnot. Beautiful dolly overhead glide in here on the monkey. I never like to see this because I don't like animal experimentation. Now the wedding ring is gone, and we never do find out what actually happened to it. And if you look at the shot preceding the surgery, he just put it there on the grating. So it would appear to me that it was stolen, because, I mean, they're not finding it somewhere on the floor or anything. Interesting appearance here by Ellen Burstyn. She doesn't have much to do in this film, but she's effective in her scenes. Tough part to play here is sort of a hospital administrator who's got to talk to the sort of the visionary, the creative guy about money and about the rules and following procedure and this kind of thing. And this is a fight between ideologies that goes on throughout the centuries. Is someone who wants to think outside the box or go around and through different parameters in terms of different logic applications versus someone who's thinking systematically in a very linear, straightforward approach. Nice pull back here in a tunnel or archway. And then we find it's just a painting. Beautiful, revealed by the director. So now we're at the apartment, and we're going to find out that his girlfriend slash partner is ill. Again, beautifully lit. You're going on a steady cam or dolly, slowly going down this hallway, and it's all lit by practical lights, very soft. And this is where, again, we're going to go further into how this film is a very sort of courageous or bold film for the time it's made in a sense that this character, Izzy, is neither Christian or Islamic or New Age even. She's just into astronomy, and she's dealing with her disease that's killing her and figuring out some sort of sense of mortality and death. And that's also going to come out through her writing because, as we all know, writing is extremely therapeutic. This is a scene that's very difficult because it does slow the film down. It does come to almost a dead pace. And Izzy here has got to be sort of Irving the explainer for a minute, and she's got to spit out a bunch of facts and lines about her book and this constellation and how they relate. And difficult to get across because you've got to relay the information but also emote in character as the actor. But she's very well lit and costumed, good makeup. Rachel Weisz always has this smile in her eyes and a smile that really lights you up in that. But it was here that you notice that she's barefooted outside in the snow, and she's embarrassed, and we haven't really known up until this point that she's ill or sick, and now we're getting some sort of idea about that. Here we have beautiful microscope photography again for the effects shots of flying through space, and this Darren Aronofsky's idea of a spaceship in the future. These are gorgeous, gorgeous shots that no one's ever seen stuff like this, even now in the year 2012. This was an extremely bold and daring film for its time, and I sure hope there comes a point where there's a reconsideration. I love that fade between him touching the bark of the tree and it fading into him bathing her in the tub. Again, we have a shot through a hallway where the bathtub's at the end. This time it was neither dollying forward or moving backward, it was just stagnant. You can tell that obviously there's tension between the two because that goes unspoken. It's somewhat littered throughout the verbiage of their arguments and discussions, but never really comes to the surface in a direct discussion. Here we have the moment where we find out that she can't feel heat, and we know that obviously she has some sort of disease that's sadly killing her. This is a very sad moment in the film, and tender moment for the characters and actors. I think this is very touchingly photographed with a lot of close-ups here, cutting back and forth between reverses, all in close-ups. There's sort of pained expressions and dialogue, but lots of tenderness, and it's not going to go to a sex scene or something very generic or stereotypical. She's weeping, but he's going to embrace and kiss her, and she's going to pull him into the tub, and it's old-fashioned, but it's somewhat romantic, and in my opinion works very well for the type of tender tone that Aronofsky was able to achieve in the domestic scenes. And of course, Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz work very well as a couple. But in the dialogue that was spoken on the roof, we've learned that she's writing a book. So this is also fascinating how, as a writer and a director, you connect all this together between we opened in New Spain, in the jungles of South America. At this moment, we don't really know what that storyline was about. Then we went to space, and we first met Tommy's character. And now we're here in the present, where, again, we have this Tommy guy. But nothing has really been explained. So the book is a fantastic device where you're at the 30-minute mark or so of the film, and you can fill in the backstory or the connective tissue between the three segments. And yet, again, it's not done in a cliched way. It's done, as with everything in this film, extremely ingeniously and also with the least amount of work or conceit. I don't know if that came out right. And that was another thing that was well hidden on the roof, was that she was wearing a toque. And now when we see her in the scenes here in the hallway, she has very short hair, which is cluing into the fact that she's probably a couple of months out of chemo. And like chemo isn't cutting it anymore, so she's not doing that anymore. I've read many reviews of this film that talk about the fact that, so here we have that beautiful underhead to overhead zoom in shot, and this will be repeated 3 times. This time it was a car driving over a bridge into the city at night. And here we have the Donovan monkey is fully regenerated and giving us lots of hope. Beautiful work around here on the Steadicam, matching between reverses of shots of the monkey's head and Hugh Jackman walking around. What I was going to say is I've read many accounts or people reviewing or discussing the film talking about how Izzy writing the book is her way of coming to terms with mortality, or the fact that she's dying, or the fact that she wants to explain something to Tommy that she can't just say in regular conversations. She's going to do it in metaphor, in writing, in a connotative way. This is perhaps true. I found it very original for a film like this. I hadn't seen something like this in a while, and I liked how it was done, in the fact that there's no big build-up. It's not hyped, like, oh, she's writing this book, and you see montages of her working on it. He's just going to open it up late at night one night with her not really telling him what the plot is or anything, and he's going to quickly fall into it and begin to see some of the connections that she is writing about to try to explain how she feels to him, but also about death and dying, and through this story about events in Old Spain. This is a cerebral film that does require the audience keeping their attention going, sort of like like an Oliver Stone film like Nixon or something, where there's a lot of playing around, going back and forth in time. It's a beautiful extreme close-up of kissing the back of her neck, where you can see the short hairs, which remind us back to him whispering to the tree bark of his tree in the future. Fascinating at this point that you realize that him in the spaceship is the same guy we're seeing in front of us now. We don't know if he's also the conquistador that we saw earlier, but we know that this guy here, this scientist guy, is going to be in space in 500 years. So it's interesting to already be thinking what exactly is going to transpire that's going to take him on that journey. Some interesting choices of angles by Aronofsky. That was a nice over-the-shoulder reverse. Lots of text on screen in this film. You remember the quote at the beginning, the close-up of the title of the book. Now we're going to have a beautiful pan across a page of calligraphy text. So back to Old Spain, which we now realize is Izzy's book. This guy, I forget his name, I think it's McCaddy or something, but he's a famous Canadian actor. He's been in a ton of movies and teleplays and TV shows up here. Great job on the makeup. Scars from the self-whipping. Beautiful profile shot with the fire in the back. Close-up shot as the face of an inquisitor. Half his face is covered in darkness. Gravelly voice. We can tell he's hard and tough because of the whipping that we've seen. Here we have a beautiful overhead, pull back, zoom out, showing the conquest. And it's interesting how this is another theme that recurs throughout history, this conquest of religious empires taking over vast areas, whether they be countries or continents and such. So this story in itself, recurring every 500 years, is not that out there really, because history does repeat. Cliff Curtis. I've loved Cliff Curtis ever since I saw Bringing Out the Dead. And great actor, great character actor. Doesn't get enough work, obviously, but all the good character actors. He's from New Zealand, and apparently took Hugh Jackman to show him some of his ancestral lands. There's a rhythm that develops in the shooting style of Aronofsky in this film. Oh, we have the last overhead, underhead, whip pan of the horse riding through the field. Beautiful shot, and it's a signature, right? It repeats 3 times, very much like music. But Aronofsky is able to develop a shooting style that is very rhythmic in this film, in that the majority of the shots are the close-ups, zoom-ins or push-ins, pull-outs or zoom-outs, or dollies. There aren't any jagged, hard angles. This shot, for instance, of the Grand Inquisitor talking is a very slow zoom-out pullback, and it's going to be reversed on the other side, showing the victims that he's speaking to. Beautiful lighting by Libatique. All firelight. I don't think there's much fill going on here, or much overhead light. Very much how you would imagine a sort of a surreal Francis Bacon take on the Inquisition times. These sort of silent, faceless monks. This was new to see this type of hanging done in a film before. And we notice how this is an exact reverse of the last shot, where it was a slow zoom or pull out. This is a slow zoom in, pull in. Hugh Jackman's face between the double crucifix. I always find it interesting in movies how there are always these holes that are perfectly built for snipers. It's like the carpenters built the one side and then thought, okay, we got to make a room across the chasm where a sniper's nest would be perfect. Anyhow, that's some gallows humor, I suppose. But this is an interesting choice, storytelling-wise, in that the hero had the shot, could take the shot, and end the whole thing. And yet he is requested not to by the Queen, because the Queen has, a different plan. Again, showing outside the box, non-linear thinking, which recurs again and again in this film, and also is probably hinting at that's something that's required from the audience to perhaps understand or see the whole thing. Now we have a beautiful dolly forward into the castle with all these suspended candles. Haven't seen this done before. This is fantastic. And the candles slightly remind you of the spaceship. These floating spheres of light. Again, beautiful rhythm developed by the slow dolly. This nice close-up on a dolly of Hugh Jackman moving in. The side profile, long shot. Now we cut to a huge overhead. That's reversed. And these actors, we've now seen them in 3 different time periods, and you see how fully invested in the part they are, and how able they are to portray these 3 different or 2 different characters, in her case 3 in his, in these different time periods. She fully fits as a queen here, whether it's the costume, the lighting, or all of it together, versus in the millennium time period that's going on, she fits that millennium look of a Manhattanite at that time. That is an old cinematography trick where you show the queen or the princess or whatever slightly obscured, in this case behind a small gate or fencing type thing, to pique your interest so that you will follow it with your eyes in anticipation till you actually get to see her fully frontal. Here's Mark Margolis coming in. Beautiful, beautiful shot of exactly what you would expect of a 1500 monk. Tough face, bald, bold, dark, mysterious. And again, he has a tough part in this scene because he's got to relate all this information about the jungle in South America and this tree and everything. Of course, Rachel Weisz is going to help. But he has to be extremely believable in selling it, but also in the moment not appear to be just storytelling, but also just talking like a normal person would. Mark Margolis is quite the joker. If you check out those Nico Tavernisi documentaries, you'll see in the behind the scenes of the making of the fountain. His website is also antwrangler.com. It's always curious to ponder the dynamic between an actress and director when they're actually married in real life. But certainly in this case, she's able to appear completely detached from any of that sense. Yeah, and this is very James Bond, Raiders of the Lost Ark type storytelling, where you have, an amulet or a whatnot, a MacGuffin, as Hitchcock would say, that can be used for visual storytelling in terms of, here's this dagger, and it's superimposed over a map, and it reveals the constellation alignment, showing the place where this tree and this temple is. It's fantastic in the sense of reality doesn't work that way, but in terms of the film and how it's visually presented, it's mythic, it's immense, it's very intriguing for the viewer. It's powerful. He's able to convey these words with such authority. Great tone to his voice. Nice silences between the words. And he says the entire speech staring Hugh Jackman straight in the eye. This whole scene, we haven't seen the Queen's face revealed, and now it is here. Great way to build up the introduction or our first sight of this main character. You slightly obscure her, keep building it up, and in the middle of the scene have her walk in and make her entrance. That way you don't have to have all these characters make an entrance at the beginning of the scene. It's very, not only economical, but also extremely effective. Definitely say a word about the fantastically authentic costumes. They look extremely realistic, but also period appropriate, and yet they don't look like actors' clothing or costumes. They look very wearable. Well, I guess perhaps not that dress, but again, Queen's dresses rarely are. This is fantastic because it's going to accentuate this moment of epic, mythic reality between this queen and this guy that she's sending on a quest, where we have this blinding light coming in that frames her face in an extreme close-up to look very angelic, domineering, mystical, authentic, romantic in a sense. Red lipstick, beautiful red lips there, and those green eyes staring down. These are many different elements working all together. We have the rhythm of the cutting, the angles of the shots, we have the cinematography going, the actors, the costumes. It's all working in this moment to sell this, because this is the main drive or crux of the film. She's sending him on this mission. And I remember there's some gorgeous violin work here by Clint Mansell. I'll talk later about his score. But in this case, it was a very minimalist piece for this scene, speaking to antiquity, but also romance, drama. Interesting snap cut there, where it was going for a fade out and then a burn through with bright light where he drops the book. And now we're back to the present day. Nice work by the production designer and set dresser. Looks like a very normal New York Manhattan loft. Divine words, and we have a push into a doorway again. Interesting here how we have reality coming together with theatricality in the sense of, you notice there was a giant white spotlight that they're standing in and that she's going to pass out in or faint on in a minute. Very soft, romantic, orange, gold, sort of light brown, buttery, very Godfather type cinematography here. They're being lit from underneath. Some nice shadows. Good reverses and close-up. Rachel Weisz always has a very defiant type of face. I don't know if it's her nose or her forehead. But that combined with her smile and her eyes. Here she is. She walks into a spotlight. The light is blinding. She looks angelic. And we notice how this is how he's going to remember her and see her when he's living in the year 2500 in the spaceship. It's highly bleached out, blown out white light that she's illuminated by, and the look of her having very pale skin. It's interesting choices by Aronofsky to do fade outs in this film, especially when he's going from time period to time period. I loved how in these CGI shots of the spaceship you could never tell where, what direction is up or down, or where in space it is. Truly how it should feel to be traveling in space. I'll get into right now the fact that I'm one of the people that's glad this film ended up being made the way it was, rather than the way it was originally going to be. I think a huge film with a ton of CGI and Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett and like a 3-hour big budget epic could have and probably would have been fantastic and great. But it wouldn't have had the authenticity and the tenderness of some of the moments in this film that Aronofsky was able to achieve. As he's famous for saying, he took the original script, which was like an opera, and turned it into a poem, which is what they filmed here. And I think this is one of those cases where a poem is actually better than an entire opera. Obviously, I can't comment too much on what's going on screen here. I mean, there are going to be a few dramatic crying and sentimental in this type scenes, so to find something else to talk about. Streets of Montreal, exterior shot, nice dolly work. I also like how this is lit because it's very much like how walking outside in downtown is. It's not overlit the way it always is in films. It's very unbalanced. There's some dark parts, some light parts, but mostly it's pretty dark. And it's bustling. Again, interesting choice here on the set designer and cinematographer's part for the lighting, because normally in these types of labs and research areas and stuff, you just have very blown out fluorescent white lights overhead. And in this case, there are tons of small, probably 60 watt or 100 watt lamps that are giving the entire scene this beautiful gold glow and some nice halos. Ellen Burstyn is one of those actors where obviously in her prime she was a lead actress, but now she can still come into a film for 8 or 15 minutes and be like a designated hitter, and just hit a home run. That's the mark of a real pro. The members of his staff, this surgical research team, they all abandon his quest or what he's doing or his passion, just as the way his soldiers did in that charge in that canyon in New Spain. The thing I find so hard to understand about the reaction to this film is I can understand that the futuristic parts might be a little challenging for some people to take. But the actual relationship, love story, drama thing that's going on in this film is, it's very real. There's good words. It's well written, well filmed. There's some great acting. It's well cast. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a girls' movie or anything, but you would think it would have drawn in more people that were into love stories and such. Especially because it talks about a relationship where you have to come to grips with the idea that one of the persons in it is going to die. Hugh Jackman walking down a hallway. It's about the 10th or 12th dolly down a hallway we've seen in the film. It's a recurring theme of passage, doorways, stairways, entrances, births, going from one place to another, journeys, movement, time. I'm all out of things to say, unfortunately. I hate long audio gaps, and I didn't think this would happen with a film I like this much. So he brought in the book to her in the hospital, saying that if she wanted to work on it, he could. And this is going to be the beginning of her telling him to finish the book, finish the story, finish it. I can sense by her laughing and smiling in this that she definitely has an acceptance of death and has come to grips with mortality and perhaps what's beyond it. But definitely she's past that stage of anger or resentment or sadness or anything about her disease that she's dying from. So she gives him a calligraphy set to finish the book. That close-up there of the calligraphy pen, if you're able to go back and freeze frame it, looks very similar to the dagger that they had in old Spain they were using on that map overlay. And we saw the small bottle of ink in the calligraphy set that harkens back to the ink he was using for tattooing purposes in the spaceship. I guess if there's a question I could ask Aronofsky about from a writer's perspective would be, what did Izzy do before she got sick? Because obviously I don't think she was any kind of like professional writer, but it would be interesting to know if she had written anything before, or if this was just a burst of creativity she was having at this crux point in her life. Nice shot here over Hugh Jackman's shoulder where we don't get to see his face, his reactions, or anything. He's speaking his part of the conversation. It's entirely played out on Rachel Weisz's face. A very tight close-up. Tommy is a character who has the the defects of his qualities, in the sense that in his insatiable passion and his drive and his desire to, discover something new or be the first or whatever, that he doesn't realize that there is a finality to things, that there is an inevitability to things, that he can't control everything. I guess that's the main thing about his type of character, is that despite everything, he cannot have control all the time, but yet can't accept that. It's a idealism that he can't reach. This overhead shot of a slight sun pattern is reminiscent of that small archway that Izzy gave the ring to the conquistador in 1500. The track used for some of these space scenes, I believe it was called Last Man, Clint Mansell. Amazing, mournful piece with piano and strings, 7 minutes long, extremely meditative. One of those great film scores that works just listening to it on headphones without the film. You don't even have to know what the film is about or have seen the film. It's kind of elegiac in some ways. It reminds me of the score for Alien 3. I'd forgotten about how many overhead shots there were in this film, especially of Hugh Jackman looking up. Great green screen work going on here, where behind Hugh Jackman is just a green screen that's projecting the special effects shots that were done. So he's surviving by eating small pieces of the tree. Recurring theme of the whispering to the small of the neck. Now he looks outside into the sunlight, sort of similar to what he did in his research lab earlier when he looked straight up overhead to the skylight and saw the snow pattern and sort of had a flash of genius thinking of this new serum to try. But in this case, he's going to sit down and get back into the book, The Story of the Fountain. I would also note here on Aronofsky's style that it is immersive in terms of getting the audience to feel like a voyeur in a sense, but it's not so kinetic or intense as being over the shoulder or handheld. All the shots are done on dollies or tripods. It's very still and sure-handed. Gorgeous shot of the monk in the jungle with a fire going. If this film had been made 30 years ago, that probably would have been Sean Connery. I also found the jungle scenes interesting in this film because they don't look like any other jungle I've seen in other films. It's sort of a mixture between a true jungle but also kind of a murky, mystic forest in a sense. There's overgrow, there's deciduousness, rot. Obviously, I mean, you could film Platoon right here, but it is somewhat different. Beautiful fast dolly in on the side profile of him making this discovery. It's interesting looking back on it. This is probably a lot more along the lines of what they intended with the fourth Indiana Jones film. This kind of detective work in the jungle with ancient relics and things. I sympathize with the character of Cliff Curtis in this scene and in this film. I mean, I can understand how you could feel going in circles in this jungle and the sense of defeat, and it kind of reminds me of the scenes in India from Alexander. But he's leading this mutiny. But in the end, we sort of sense that it's fair because only Hugh Jackman's character is going to get to the end. If anything, at this point, we're thinking maybe Cliff Curtis might get there too in some way, or he might be hurt, but the others are all going to perish. On the other hand, I never expected or suspected them to just stab the monk and kill him. It goes to show how precious these people are about life, even taking their religion into account. Great lighting here for an action scene inside this tent where it's all lit by these flickering flames, practical lights. You can just see enough. It's very realistic in the way that it would be. It's not overlit. Fighting in these conditions would be very difficult, especially for peripheral vision, because it's so dark and the flickering light gives you false images with shadows. Pan up. Zoom out of the cross, the blazing star, sun, the cross on it. And we're back to where we are, where the film started. Beautiful arc because really you remember that you were here, but it doesn't feel forced or boring again this time. This time it feels double impactful because you know what's going on, and yet you already know what happens. Very brilliant writing. Now, coming up here is something I could talk about for 30 minutes, so I'll try to get it through as quick as I can. But what I want to talk about here in this scene, or in this sequence that's about to happen, is what film can really do and achieve that perhaps is taken for granted or not spoken about much, which is not only playing with time, but those moments in our lives where we can go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in a matter of seconds, and yet film can do it in slow motion and with editing and shots and angles to make the moment linger and be more impactful and emotional. So here comes Ellen Burstyn to tell him the great news that he's cured cancer. It's the peak or pinnacle of his career. And now he can save Izzy. Then he turns, starts running slow motion, down a hallway to a doorway. She's dead. He's too late. As I said, highest of highs to lowest of lows in a matter of seconds, but captured so beautifully on film with slow motion, cutting angles, rhythm, composition. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but him attacking the doctor and destroying the blind allows in this blinding, penetrating white light through the window. And at this moment, just like in what happened in the past, he realizes that the tree is dying, just as she had died, and he was remembering that. Difficult acting. You're on the set alone, this futuristic set, and you're acting with a tree. I know these people get paid a lot of money, but sometimes I do have a lot of respect for them. And with the snow and her having a funeral or being buried in the wintertime, it's again speaking to the time cycles in this film. We've gone from sort of late fall, early winter, now we're seeing midwinter. Changing of seasons, changing of time, death, renewal, reincarnation, cycles. I always like funeral scenes in films like this where they're not just a simple funeral ceremony and the body is put in the ground and buried over and that's it. I like it when there's some sort of emotional thrust where someone does something that's not the expected mode of behavior in that scenario. But here, even confronted with her death, he gains a defiance where he is going to solve the mystery and cure death, which he now sees as a disease. bold, daring, but also refusing to perhaps accept finality, reality. Chapter 12, the number 12, and he must finish it. What happens after he's struck with the flaming sword? Spilled ink. And now he's going to begin the self-tattooing. I wanted to say a word about the posters. I guess the main poster for this film is sort of the shot of the spaceship, with Hugh Jackman looking outwards and Rachel Weisz behind him in her winter coat. But the alternate poster I saw was Rachel Weisz walking around in that wintertime setting that her funeral was just at. And I thought it was a much more effective and better poster, in my opinion. Because I think, in terms of marketing, the spaceship thing scares off people, and I think that's the real sad thing about this film, as I was saying earlier, is there's so much great stuff in it, but yet just the very concept, the idea of this spaceship, this guy, 500 years from now, it's too much, and people will disregard an entire film that's great. I like boldness, I like originality, I like daring, I like the idea of saying, let's reinvent the idea of a spaceship, or let's reinvent how a spaceship is filmed, let's reinvent how space scenes are filmed without CGI and on a tight budget. This film has the rare ability to feel mythic, but yet at the same time extremely personal and subjective. I remember after the first time seeing this film, it was very much like seeing Dr. Zhivago for the first time. When that film ended, I felt like it had been a few years. Just not because of the length of the film, it's just everything that had happened. It was so long. Anyway, cutting back into Tommy moving down this hallway with this emblazoned white light cross behind him, forming from the doors closing. So Tommy is going forward on his quest. Again, not necessarily trying to finish it, but trying to break through, go further. Doesn't want to be stopped. He believes he can still find a way around it through his own means, whether physical effort or mental. Great job casting by Aronofsky, all the bit players of his research staff team, some of the doctors in the hospital and that. They all performed their roles extremely well and were well cast. And we have the beginning of Tommy and his spaceship going into Shibalba. I believe this is just fantastic watching this on Blu-ray. Nobody is doing this in movies today. It's so gorgeous and beautiful. And, you remember it for the rest of your life. Wouldn't even matter if this was a good film or not. Just some of these shots in space alone are good enough. I love how he is forced by circumstance to sort of appreciate things and accept finality or mortality or an end. But yet, as she stands there and tells him, he can still finish it. It's just not going to be the it that he might necessarily want or believed in or was aiming for. Very difficult acting shots here where you have to stare directly into the lens of the camera and act. It's always great if you can have the actor that you're supposed to be talking to on the other side of the camera to at least give you a feeling of some realism and rhythm. His memories are beginning to coalesce or flood together. Sort of what they talk about when you're dying, where you see flashes of all these things that happened in your life. I can imagine a lot of them would intermingle like channels on a TV if you were flipping through. But these are very important words she's telling him. You do know how to finish it. He says he is trying to finish it, but he doesn't know how. And she is trying to tell him you do. You will. Trusting yourself. Trusting the unconscious, the subconscious, the you that really knows your path and your truth. She's sort of telling him he's still thinking too much with his head. I remember watching from the making of or behind the scenes that he has to do this climbing of the tree like in one take, in one shot. And obviously you don't fault the guy, but it was funny watching it being filmed because as usual, like after 10 tries, none of them worked and he still kept falling every time. This has a sort of run Lola run quality to it here where this sort of reconsideration of choices, what did I decide to do versus what could I have done? In this case, the contemplation of what if he went and worked on the monkey and the virus, or what if he went and spent the first snowfall with Izzy. Here's the tree climbing I was talking about. So you have this long dolly back in front of this huge tree set on a green screen set. And yeah, most of that had to be done in one take. He assumes the lotus pose of his Buddhism and meditation. And again, a lot of this is very, esoteric or new agey to some people. But the key is to have an open mind. The key is to not say to yourself, oh, I can't understand what's going on. This is all artistic, artsy-fartsy metaphor, da-da-da-da-da-da. You just look at it and take the images for what they mean. He's there in space floating. He goes through a tunnel. And it comes back to this moment. And he's going to defeat this warrior priest. Not by striking him down. by finishing it. In that shot we just saw of space, it was sort of a metaphor for like ascension. And now that he is, like the Buddha in this lotus position, the warrior priest is kneeling before him in a showing and sign of respect. He has become the leader, the truth, the one that was foretold. And now he gets to walk down the brilliant, gold-lit tunnel through the back of the pyramid to the Tree of Life. The most gorgeous tree you could ever imagine. Lovely pullback here, revealing another thing I love about this film is there are very few expected turns. You don't get to a part in the film and go, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen next. Or unless, if you do, you're usually wrong. I mean, in this scene, for instance, we think that he's going to draw out this sap, and it's just going to cure his wound, and he's going to be immortal. But like him, we don't understand that by immortal, that doesn't necessarily mean immortal in a denotative way. It means a connotative or metaphorical way. You will live forever, but not necessarily in the form that you now have. I think this film was also really important in 2006. I don't want to get old-fashioned and say the times we live in, but it was a very optimistic picture for its time, and still is today watching it. This is so excellent, though. Him drinking the sap like it's complete nourishment. He looks up and sees Xibalba as he's taken or eaten from this tree, the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil. And he realizes how to live forever with the queen by putting on the ring. And then boom, the unexpected. I didn't expect this. This was completely shocking to me the first time I saw it. Not too bad, not too bad. I give it about a 75-80% out of 100% for realism. Beautiful shot. We've had so many of these overhead zoom outs or pullbacks. They keep getting repetitively, rhythmically inserted in the film, and they work fantastically in this film for exactly what they're doing, which is revealing. And the overhead view we're supposed to take as our own as we're observing this, what's going on. For me, I don't have to take a literal or even linear meaning from any of these scenes of him, floating in this bubble in space with this supernova going and this tunnel of light. It doesn't have to mean anything specifically for me. That doesn't mean I'm just sitting going, oh, I like watching the pretty lights. But I enjoy storytelling that's going to allow me to decide my own meaning and find my own meaning. I do also highly recommend checking out the graphic illustrated novel that Aronofsky did. It's available on the internet. Some really great artwork and paintings there. And it also clues you in a little bit to perhaps more what they were looking for with the original version that they were going to shoot. I may not be the most intelligent viewer in the world, but I never got the idea about the tree until this moment. Not of him planting the seed, but when he had the seed in his hand, then it all dawned on me, and I was like, holy crow, that's amazing. But I didn't see it the whole time. And it's interesting how this film seems to be pointing that the key to immortality is the tree of life, and yet the tree of life holds the key to knowledge. Therefore, one could say that knowledge equals immortality. And I guess it would sort of be implied that that's the mission he goes on in the next 500 years, which is to advance his knowledge far enough to allow him to live forever, to be immortal. And in a sense, cure death. I love films that have those little moments where there's like a whisper or something off screen said by the character in a close-up shot. Anyhow, I'm going to stop talking because you should turn up the volume and listen to this amazingly fantastic Clint Mansell score. It's been a real pleasure talking about this film that I love. I hope I wasn't too boring and said a few interesting things. So thank you very much, and until next time.